Thank you. All right. Welcome everybody to the July 10th Argo CD Contributor Experience meeting. I'll be your host, Dan Garfield. Before we jump into the issues, just want to acknowledge the contributions for this week. Looks like we had 28 issues opened this week, 20 PRs created, but 38 closed. Always love to see a winning week where we make more progress than work we gain up. Relatively quiet week on approvers and reviewers, so thank you, Rankin, for doing so many. And looks like Alex, thank you for all of the merges this week, and I can see that there are a number of other contributors. Appreciate it. Before we jump into the discussion on issue triage, this last week we had Nitish and Andri. So while you're thinking of any issues that might have come up, do we have any volunteers for primary and secondary this next week? Just a reminder, this is in order to be a primary, we expect you to be a maintainer that's familiar with the code base, but a secondary, people can volunteer for. And the ideal of triage is that you just are going to make yourself available over the next week to review issues as they come in, try to respond, maybe help people out if you can. So, any volunteers for primary and secondary?
I can be primary next week.
All right, sounded like Leo. Boom. Okay. And secondary? And again, if you haven't done secondary before, you could raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be on this list. I want to do secondary. You don't have to be on this list.
I can do secondary, so Kanika decide.
I think Kanika. Kanika?
Hmm. Yeah,
Cool.
What's the
Okay,
last name
so
in the list?
oh yeah, you're on here
Rana.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm there.
perfect. Cool. Thank you. All right, Nitish, Andri, anything to report for the week?
Um,
Mm, yeah, I have nothing from me.
actually, there was a security issue, but I think Michael already responded to that, so nothing from my end as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Then we'll go into discussion. Uh, we do have some discussion topics still up here. We'll bring some of those down. Did all of these make it down already? Oh yeah, most of them did. Okay. So let's start with Reggie. You want to talk about the upgrade to Redis 8. Let's see, is Reggie with us? She is not with us. Um, so I think I can uh bring this up with her. I discussed it with her earlier. So we're currently the Argo project is on, I think, Redis 6.4. And there was a choice not to upgrade to Redis 7, not really made proactively per se. I think it was more of there was some confusion around the licensing.
Yeah.
Redis 8 has a new license that is more permissive and more in line with open source.
Mm.
So there are open CVEs on Redis 6.4 that I think either are not being fixed or are not present in Redis 8. So there is a request to upgrade to Redis 8. Um,
Mhm.
and
Sorry, I
so I
believe
know
it's
that,
like not 6.4, but 7.4. I think we've been
oh,
on that.
7.4 is
Yeah,
what we're currently on.
I believe so, unless we like did some regards.
So it must be like 7.4 and then it was like 7.6 had a license change or something.
There's been even something on 7.4 to be honest, but there's been a discussion that actually doesn't apply because we're not competing with Redis and we're just like users and we're not
Yeah,
using
yeah.
their code.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, so there was Reggie wanted to start working on doing an upgrade to Redis 8. I
Mhm.
know that in tandem, I think we had decided, Michael had decided, and as a group, we had decided that we did want to offer an alternative potentially to allow people to install Valkey. course, they can do that today. They can just swap the image out if they're using the Helm chart or
Mm.
whatever. So that's totally possible. We just don't test for it right now. So is there any opposition to upgrading to Redis 8? And do we feel like it needs to be dependent on also offering Valkey, or can these two efforts just proceed independently of one another?
I think it can be independent. I don't see much issues. The only thing with like Valkey, we need to figure out a way how to scale our like manifest options because we cannot just keep introducing all combinations of things. Like I saw this with Hydrator, for example. Like it's like if you only saw this Hydrator, we create a copy of each like manifest basically. I don't know if that changed. And yeah, I just don't know like a better way for now. But it's something we can brainstorm. Maybe like we have some generator for manifest or something.
Yeah.
Where you just choose what to do and it like generates manifest for you instead of just copying manifest from the repo. Maybe simple shell script or whatnot.
The only
Yeah, I don't
concern
know
I
if
have, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Yeah, I was just trying to say that the only concern I have is the licensing thing. So I remember they added something more restrictive, and now you're saying that they're back to the original license they had. So this
It's not
sounds a
the
bit
original license.
okay.
Um,
So this back and forth sounds a bit strange. So as this is one of the key components that we have, uh, yeah, if someone has the availability to do a deeper investigation and provide us some information on that, I think would be great. If
yeah, so
not,
I
I would go with less effort.
So I can share a little bit about that. So previously they had the BSD3 license, which is a very permissive license, very common in open source, not really doesn't really present a challenge to anybody to use BSD. So this is the license that we were using. Then in 7.4 to 7.8, they introduced the Redis license and the SSPL. These are more restrictive and they are um, meant to prevent anybody from offering enterprise versions of Redis for sale or hosted Redis. So, as far as end users go, this would only affect them if they were then hosting, maybe they were hosting Argo CD and selling that to other people, and they were managing Redis, maybe even in a potentially special way beyond, because it's really targeted at like Redis has some competitors that that basically offer like their own competing enterprise services for Redis. So Valkey is definitely really important for companies like AWS or other companies that want to offer an enterprise Redis version. I don't think it really has an impact for Argo CD. So I actually really wasn't worried about, and we did a review with the CNCF where there was discussion about what the CNCF licensing requires, because the CNCF licensing does say that components need to be licensed a certain way. And so there is some gray area, and Michael, if you had a different impression from this conversation, please chime in. But there's some gray area about if you just reference an image as part of manifests, that's not necessarily part of the code base, so it doesn't necessarily count as a component. So it may not be an issue. Of course, you can use Argo CD without Redis, just runs slow, and you know. Um,
Mm.
so there is all that. Now with Redis 8, they had a lot of backlash from that licensing change, and so they moved to the AGPL version 3. The GPL version 3, the main thing is that it is a copy left license. So if you take Redis 8 and you do some tweaks or enterprise work to it, you have to contribute those, and you sell it commercially, you have to contribute those back to the community. You're not allowed to keep those separate. We
That's
don't
for
touch the
Redis
Redis.
specific. That's Redis specifically, right? Not Argo CD code base, right?
That's right. It would be the Redis code base specifically. We
Yeah.
don't touch that code base. We don't build
Yeah.
our own Redis image. So it wouldn't affect us as a project and for the vast majority of our end users, unless they are, again, like hosting Redis for their customer
Mhm.
and potentially modifying it, then I guess they would be subject to the AGPL. But I don't know anybody that applies to. I've never, the people it should apply to, like of anybody, is maybe CodeFresh, Octopus Deploy, but it actually doesn't really apply to us even. So I just don't think that there's anybody
Mhm.
out there that it really applies to. So I'm not anxious about deploying this with AGPL v3. I don't think it causes any issues. If people consume Redis, I think it's totally fine. Now, from the question in the comments from Christian, what is the heavy lift for Valkey? Valkey is intended to be a drop-in replacement for Redis, requiring no additional configuration. However, when we do our CI/CD pipelines, we don't test against Valkey. We just test against Redis, and currently we just test against Redis, uh, presumably I think 7.2. So the real lift here is in order to update to Redis 8, we may need to update some tests as part of that to make sure that we can validate properly against Redis 8. And then to add in Valkey, we would probably want to add some additional tests to make sure that Valkey is working properly if we wanted to offer that as an official option. Now, again, Valkey markets itself as a drop-in replacement. People can just deploy it today. You can, in the Helm chart, you can just overwrite the image and the customize. You could run a customization to overwrite the image, and you could just deploy Valkey. It's just that we don't test it. So those are the main concerns.
Yeah, I think it should be fine. In terms of license, I don't know. I'm kind of neutral on Valkey versus Redis as default, for example. Probably I would stick to Redis because, hey, yeah, they made some sort of a mistake and then they realized it and fixed it. Versus Valkey, it hasn't been battle tested as much. Maybe like who knows? Maybe in the future they also like do some shenanigans with licenses, like maybe 5 years from now. So I don't know. Like I feel like sticking with Redis is totally reasonable. But yeah, I think
Yeah, and it
seems
is worth
fine.
mentioning too that we do have a good chunk of kind of enterprisey Argo users that use enterprise Redis. And so
Mhm.
since that's already validated for Redis, they can just drop in the enterprise version and that they already paid for.
Mhm.
And it's not
Mhm,
an issue.
mhm, mhm.
Leo, does that answer your questions
Yeah,
or
yeah.
concerns?
Thank you for the explanation. It does, and I agree. Redis 8 seems good, so we can give it a try.
Okay. Okay, so we'll mark that as resolved. All right, thank you. Nitish, you had add new labels, taking inspiration from Kubernetes project.
Yeah, so I think a few days ago, I think Reggie shared uh, something around how we're going to triage the issues. So this was a discussion that I want to bring this up in this meeting is so since the project has like a lot of number of issues and it becomes like difficult trying to understand which issue a contributor should try to pick up and work upon. We have very specific good labels, which like something like more information needed. Um, but still, I think maybe since over a period of time, these issues are growing over and over again, and it becomes difficult for contributors to know which issue they would want to pick up, whether it's actually whether it's like a user misconfiguration thing or it's actually an Argo CD bug sort of thing. So I am proposing maybe we can take an inspiration from how Kubernetes project has certain sort of labels such as triage needed, triage accepted, which when a contributor sees an issue with the label triage accepted, they're going to only work on that issue if they see that label. So if they see another label on an issue needs triage, then it clearly means that this issue is not properly ready to be worked upon. So maybe I referred that documentation. I already added that link, but I think for the project, if we can introduce, we can take inspiration from the Kubernetes project and maybe introduce those some labels. I think that can eventually help us and eventually the contributors too.
I think it's unfortunately, I don't think it's gonna work because we have a huge backlog of 3,000 issues and we cannot like possibly backfill that. Maybe for new issues it's fine, but like I feel like also triage is a part of work. So like ready to work upon is actually like I think in my at least in my point of view, it's like anything is ready to work upon. You just need to identify which step it is. Do you like need to reproduce or was it reproduced or like maybe it's ready to be closed or something. So but it's all like essentially kind of a different kind of work. So yeah. I feel like I don't know. Honestly, I tried to like also do some management of like issues and like, but kind of given up on that because it's like basically kind of worms. Um, so and I think just basically some combination of high stars issues versus like most recent versus maybe like old one plus maybe if you're interested in a specific like topic, you can search by specific tag, for example, server side diff or something, or like CLI or whatnot. But I don't think like these kind of triage labels, it just like probably adds more like burden and probably is not gonna like this label. But in general, like labels, I think I find them useful. We need to think about how we like apply it to existing issues and like basically ideally we come up with labels which don't need any like backfill. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with what Andre is saying. I think the label idea is great and doing something to improve our triage is also really good. Um, but the other thing is the discipline, right? So we can specify the new labels, you can provide a new documentation, but then we need that whoever is doing the triage to follow that new process. So I guess it's a discussion that already started. So Reggie is taking, I guess, the lead on that. She's preparing some docs, and I think we should continue discussing and finding ways to improve our triage process. And
Yeah,
this and what Kubernetes does is definitely giving us some north. I don't think we should just discard what they're doing.
part of what is I just looking at the Kubernetes project for a minute works for them, I think, is that they do have kind of a published roadmap, and so they have things that are like, oh, this is a long-term priority. This thing is um, a priority for the project to address, whatever. And there is some work being done by Katie and Reggie and some others to kind of start defining that roadmap with, of course, with Michael and the community. But I think that's probably dependent on that being done. Like if we're actually doing more kind of roadmap planning right now, it's fairly ad hoc, but if we do a little bit more roadmap planning, then issues will start to naturally fit into like, okay, this is the time when we're planning to do this thing. This is a priority for people. Um, and it might also help if we had some more SIGs, right? Because with the Kubernetes project, part of what makes it work is like, oh, that's like a networking problem. SIG networking, you guys go work on that. Oh, that's like this problem. We have SIG scalability, we've got SIG security. SIG marketing sure as heck isn't contributing code. Um, that's just a joke because I'm on SIG marketing. Anyway, but yeah, I think there's probably dependency here. But I think Natish is a good idea. One other thing that might be useful here is uh, Reggie and Pasha put together a AI powered uh, labeler for issues, where it would go through and it would review an issue and generate labels for it, and you could accept them or edit them and then just reject it. And so you could go through and you could just rapidly organize, a couple hundred issues, and they went and did that for like 2,000 issues going back into the backlog. So if we get there and there are some tools that we could potentially take advantage of. So
Oh, wow.
worth taking.
Nice.
Um,
Speaking of roadmap, just one note. I think it's like we need to think of like multi-year discipline for that, because like when I just joined contributing to the project, I saw that some documentation mentioned, hey, we have these like boards with things worked upon, they move between states and so on and so forth. But in fact, it wasn't updated for a couple of years. So I think we just don't want to like be inspired right now, maybe do it for like a couple of quarters, and then like give up. So like I don't know, I don't want to be too discouraging, but also like I think we need to think about how do we maintain like multi-year like discipline on that.
yeah,
Okay,
that discipline has to come in. I agree.
got it.
Um,
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
okay. Nitish, you also had introduced in the approver CLI as a scoped approver role. This is
Yes,
something we
so
discussed previously. I don't remember what the endpoint
I
of it
think
was.
I think with new I think with new membership meeting coming up on, so I just want to bring this issue once again, just to see if we can probably add a scoped approval role. I know I brought this up, I think a lot of like few months ago, but I think maybe it can be good time to just discuss
Mm,
about this before the new membership meeting happens.
yeah.
So again, for all of those who are not aware, we just want to. So
Mm,
this issue is basically about adding a scoped approval rule for CLI, not like a fully approval role, but it's just that if anyone with
mhm,
the approval scoped approval role access for CLI commands, such as in the say like the changes occur in the CMD directory or something in the docs related to the CLI, then the person with the approver access for those CLI eventually can approve those PRs and merge them eventually, but just
mm,
for the CLI, not for any specific
mhm,
part of the code base. So that's the role of scoped approval role. I think we do
mm.
have one for docs as well as for uh, CI or GitHub Actions, if I'm correct in that. But this is just a proposal to add a scoped approval rule for CLI.
The thing that I seem to remember us discussing that was a challenge here is that most of the most of the issues or the PRs that involve the CLI end up touching the rest of the code base. This is probably not a good label to be clear about how often it happens, but I don't know. I think what would be the most helpful to clarify this is if we were like, oh, here's an example of like 10 PRs where if we had the scope approval rule, it actually would have worked really well. Because it seems like usually there's a CLI change and it requires some API change as well. And if that's the case, then I don't know if it gets us anything. But if there are a bunch of CLI specific PRs happening that don't involve any other code base, then this would be a great fit. I just don't know if I just don't know the volume.
And so I've got some code and some old statistics that can help with that. I dropped them in the chat. When we first designed the scoped approver system, I wanted to answer kind of the same question, like what scopes might actually make sense, what files do they touch? And I forget which file it is in here, but there's basically a summary that says, okay, here are the PRs that only touch the CLI directory. And at least at that time, that was a non-trivial number of PRs. There were a number of PRs that touched files outside of that. But we could run this again. Look at report.md, I think is where I put the actually interesting stuff. Yeah, so CMD, we had 25 PRs at that time that touched only the CMD directory. So it's like not docs, but it's also not nothing.
And this is all time.
I think that this was all time as of the run. Yeah. And if you search the word CMD, you'll see further down in the file, there's a long tail of PRs that hit like the CMD and the util directory, the CMD and the server directory. I don't think that those are going to be easy to capture, but like maybe Nitish, if you want to look through there and see if maybe there's one other directory or some files we can move around for common use cases that might help us create the scope.
This is an awesome project,
Yeah, it was
Michael.
fun. I got to use a lot of JQ, which I always love doing.
Although I wonder, like, maybe we should think about code owners in general. Like, do we wanna like maybe have different approvers for different places and accept the complexity and work on that? Or alternatively, I don't know, maybe like I don't know, Nitish, did you have any trouble applying for like full approver or like feel like not there yet?
Uh, I'm not thinking about that right now, but I think with the current experience, and not only me, I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people may prefer having an approval role for CLI since it's a little bit easier to get started, and then you eventually can learn on the go. So this can be a good fit. I don't have any any objections so far around going for a full approval, but I think having an approval role just for the CLI, like just we have for the docs or GitHub Actions, I think this might make sense for us to add a approval role for CLI.
It's also a great way for folks to audition basically for a full approver role. Like, it's hard to know how someone's going to work as an approver with merge privileges until they're actually merging stuff. And this provides that stepping stone.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. My question is just about how often it will get used, but I don't see any other issue with accepting it. So
Probably, yeah. I guess it's okay to have it. Like if it's not too hard to implement, which probably shouldn't be. I assume it's just not get used, and maybe we can like follow up on that and maybe like change the scope or somehow or
In
like
this room?
something.
Oh.
Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, I don't see much harm like either.
I
okay.
think what we can also do is maybe when we're adding this scoped approval role, we can document it properly so that anyone who eventually gets the scoped approval role access, they can go through the docs and then understand what Dan was having a concern about. What if there have been API changes and then there have been some changes in the CMD directory as well? What is expected from someone who has got the scoped approval role access that time? So I think if we properly document this thing and eventually this can solve problem for us. And as Michael mentioned that it can be stepping stone, I completely agree with that.
Let's see, Nitish. I think we're gonna go to the next issue. I know we have about 12 minutes left. Before we jump into this one, I want to give Eugene a chance, since he hasn't had any other issues raised yet. So, Eugene, you had some questions around the Argo CD build process.
Right, thank you, Dan. I've been recently working on the monorepo controller, and I've been trying to reuse the partially actually reuse Argo CD build process, all the workflows there. And I got some questions, mainly that I see that essentially names of images, names of repos, everything is hard-coded. That means if someone tries to fork Argo CD and maintain his fork for corporate use, or he wants to build automatically his images, he have to change all this stuff. It's lots of places. Then he'll have troubles. He should make effort not to put his changes back into his contributions. It's lots of trouble to maintain that. Why, the question why it's works that way? Is there a specific reason or just one we should parameterize this?
When you say hard coded, you mean specifically in the GitHub workflows?
specifically in GitHub workflows, it has if specific repository name of Argo CD and specific names of namespaces of and names of Docker images.
Yep. So the ifs, I think, were for cases where we wanted to make sure folks working on PRs in their own branches or on their own forks don't have a bunch of workflows running for Argo CD. That may have been to limit the number of runners we were taking up. I can't recall exactly. But as far as hard coding goes, the reason for that is basically just that we don't maintain our release process as a library for external consumers. Theoretically, we could, but it would be non-trivial work. We'd have to make sure that any change we make in the future doesn't disrupt someone else's workflow. And that's just not a role that we've chosen to take on. If it's something you're interested in contributing, we'd definitely look at a PR.
Okay. I've seen that in Argo rollouts, this work has been done by Costis.
So it sounds like, Michael, there's not an opposition if Eugene wanted to go and templatize it and set that up.
If it's reasonably simple, if it's 1,000 line change and then we have to make sure we don't fix or break something that's brittle in the future, I wouldn't like that. But if it was easy to read, easy to maintain, sure, it'd be great.
The next question about the publishing images, the images in the GitHub container registry. Essentially, we are uploading images to both registries. What is the reason for GitHub? I ask because I have now managing the monorepo project. What's the reason for this? Should we do the same thing with the monorepo controller or just go with Quay.io?
The official repo we have is quay.io. I remember GitHub being used in the past. And I think that was deprecated. I'm a bit surprised you're saying it's still being in use, but the official repo is definitely Quay.
Maybe we push latest to GHCR so that the demo instance can pull off of there and avoid rate limiting. It was something weird like that, but I don't remember exactly.
So what you say means there is some technical issue, not organizational issue, not the clients want to have it in GitHub.
I think in this case, we were the clients because we run a demo instance of Argo CD. I can drop that link. And I think at some point, Quay was rate limiting us, or maybe it was Docker Hub at the time before we moved to Quay. So we used GHCR for the latest image tag to avoid those rate limits. That's a very rough recollection.
And Eugene, a question for you. From my understanding, you're saying you're working on a new project probably in Argo Proj Labs. Is that correct?
Right.
So if you're doing that, the way to go is definitely publishing the images in Quay and building the release process tailored to your needs, not really copying what we have in Argo CD. It's way too complex for small projects like what we have in Argo Proj Labs.
Thank you. You are right. It's very complex and takes lots of time. I'm taking the relevant part of it.
Yeah, there are other projects in Argo Proj Labs that you can refer to and have a simpler release process for your project.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it sounds like we were able to answer that question.
Yep.
Okay. So you also had two issues linked around fixing Mac OS development environment stuff.
Right. Recently, I've had to move to Mac OS as my developer workstation, and I've seen that really it's not the best. One doesn't have the best development experience with Mac OS. I've seen that there are some tests, unit tests are failing. Something from Make run, make, start, things don't work like they should. I've identified several issues with that. Essentially, the most of problems are with mounting file system, macOS file system from the Docker. And the Docker product, Docker desktop, they have several bugs with file system semantics. Like when tests creates files, write-only files with some strange modes, it isn't really supported. I've opened some bugs against Docker Docker product, but and I'm thinking about fixing all the bugs, all the tests, so they will run out of the box on macOS. And what I would to know what is the best way, what is the best way to fix those bugs. I see two ways. Essentially, we could skip those tests when we identify that file system doesn't have needed feature or it's buggy. Or we could just get rid of this mounting, don't use files that don't use the Argo CD source directory as the place for opening those test data files. Just move it to the saner part of the file system. It could be TMP, but we still are mounting TMP in the same way. So probably we could treat this problem preventively. That is, move those files to TMP and don't mount TMP as from the host system. So what is your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I've given up on Docker desktop. To me, OpenStack has been so much a better experience. Just my
What are you
probably we
using
should.
instead?
OpenStack. I mean, I've had so much bad experiences with Docker desktop. It just wasn't worth the hassle. But
Adding to it, we're on Rancher, and I haven't heard of file system issues specifically while developing Argo CD.
Okay.
Any other advice or comments? I think of these two options you mentioned, I probably like the moving to temp better. I don't think that there's any reason why the tests need to be written to the file system.
just wondering if there's some weirdness with temps on Mac OS. I mean, I would say it's worth a shot.
So what you mean, it's essentially that we should document that we don't support Docker desktop, and that's it.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, I guess we should try to fix
But-
it. But I'm just saying if you want to get moving quickly and not get stuck in, because I've been trying to fix stuff, and then I've just hit loggerheads with stuff that's in upstream Docker desktop, which obviously is not my field of expertise. I mean, if I would say like if I would love to see option two. I just don't. I suspect it's not going to get you all the way. And it's from my experience, that alone, and then combined with that Docker desktop is extremely slow. It's what I mean, if you want to go down that path, to be my guest, but I suspect you're going to spend a lot of time going into Docker desktop rabbit holes, which you might not get out of.
I think I've found all the bugs that affect the build. I've submitted to them one bug, and I can submit more. We have a support contract with them. It's
Nice.
eventually
sounds like-
solvable.
Yeah,
But
it sounds like Eugene, if you want to solve it, you definitely have the support of everybody. Nobody wants to just say like, oh, we don't support it or we do support it necessarily. But if it's also just a blocker for you and you wanted to try using
it's
OrpStack or Rancher Desktop, then that's
it's
cool.
not a blocker, but essentially I see people using people are opening box on it. It's a popular combination, macOS plus desktop.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks for bringing that up. Hopefully that's helpful. We have, it sounds like people are kind of recommending probably option two, and some available workarounds. Nitish, with our last minute, do you want to talk about the um, any namespace issue?
Sure. Just a quick sub. So when you're using the Argo CD apps generate command, especially to generate an application set, uh, in such a way that you're using the Git generator, and so your project is going to lie in some another namespace, then you eventually come across this certain error that says that you're unable to get the project uh, because that namespace does not match the namespace Argo CD on the client. And I think I and Alex were discussing about this. Ishita also added a comment around that. But this issue is only coming across when you're using the Git generator and not any other generator such as list or any other sort of generator.
Is there a security limitation here?
I don't think so, as far as I can see though.
Hmm. Is the fix straightforward here, just to add in, just to update this line of code that you identified yesterday?
Um, well, this is actually the line of code that's actually causing the issue, but I think we'll have to do a more research and figure out how we're going to fix this issue. But definitely, I don't think so. Just changing this line might solve this issue for us. As far as I can see.
Hmm. Huh, okay. Well, thanks for bringing that up. If anybody is any other comments on that, encourage you to leave it on the issue. Otherwise, I think we're at time, so we'll come to a close. Thanks everybody for
Sorry
all
to
your
interrupt you.
contributions. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Avni. I'm looking for ways to contribute to the project. So if anyone can share some starter points for the ways I can contribute.
Yeah, sounds great. I think default way is like, did you already look at labels good first issue and issues with that?
Um,
Yeah, so basically just go to issues, filter by good first issue label, and like just pick something which is like not worked upon or which didn't have any updates recently. Yeah.
And interact with us over the CNCF Slack. That's a good way to yeah, check with other maintainers if something makes sense to be worked on.
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, and there is I don't know if you've read the contributors guide in the documentation, but there is a guide there that starts off with like, hey, here's how you build this locally, and here's different ways to interact with people. So that'd be a good place to start too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for introducing yourself. We look forward to having your contributions. All right, thanks everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I just one quick. I just posted on the chat